So
fair enough. Okay, let's get underway. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tom McAllister, and on behalf of the Kawartha Lake Stewards Association, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 KLSA Annual General Meeting. So it's a real pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for joining us virtually. As those of you who joined us last year will know, this is our second AGM that's been conducted via Zoom. And we're sincerely hoping that we'll be able to join you in person for our spring meeting in early 2022, and that the current situation will largely have been resolved by then. So on behalf of KLSA, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this meeting. Next slide, please. Before we get underway, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the fact that the greater Peterborough area is in Mississauga, Nishinabeg territory in the context of the Rice Lake Treaty 20 and Williams treaties. September 30th this year marked the first observance of a National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It is vital that we commemorate the loss of generations who are no longer with us and acknowledge the ongoing trauma experienced by residential school survivors, their families, and their communities. So we will take this opportunity right now to do that and also acknowledge the fact that we want to recognize the efforts of Indigenous people as water protectors and acknowledge the fact that there's much that we can learn from them in order to achieve a more sustainable and regenerative future. Next slide, please, Bob. A little bit of housekeeping here this morning. There will be an opportunity throughout to enter any questions or comments you have in chat, and we will be monitoring them. There will be a couple of opportunities, as we said a moment ago, for people to share their questions or concerns, because we want to make this an interactive meeting. Would suggest, please, would ask that you mute your mic when you're not speaking, especially if you're dog sitting, because we understand that there could be disruptions. So all teasing aside, if you could please mute when you're not speaking. In terms of video, you will find that your internet connection speed will probably improve if you turn your video off. Because some of the people who are dialing in this morning are in rural locations, it might be helpful if you're not speaking, and if you're not speaking, that you can turn your video off, but you can continue to watch, of course, the feed for the meeting. Finally, this meeting is being recorded. If the little annoying box is in front of you right now, you can just click continue, or if you choose, you can leave the meeting. So that's it for housekeeping. Next slide, please. In terms of the voting process, because this is an annual general meeting and there will be a number of motions that have to be presented and accepted, what we're going to do is as follows. The director who is presenting at that time will make a motion we'll move the motion, and we'll ask for a seconder. A second director will speak up at that point, identify themselves, and second the motion. And comments will be invited from anyone, either for or against the meeting. So it's entirely up to you. We're looking for input and would welcome that from you. The vote will then be held. If you vote for a meeting, if you are in favor, of a motion, if you are in favor of a motion, you don't need to do anything. Silence is agreement. However, if you wish to vote against a motion or you've got some concerns, then please type a comment into chat and unmute your mic and speak so that we can understand what your reservations are. The opposed votes will be tallied against the total number of members present in order to determine whether or not a motion has been passed. So that's how the voting process will work, because once again, we're dealing with the limitations of technology and Zoom. So that's it. Mike, next slide, please. Mike, I'm sorry. Yes, Bob, next slide, please. I'm going to take this opportunity to turn it over to Ed Leardom, our chair, to say a few words. Ed, over to you.
Let me unmute myself first. Thank you, Tom, and welcome everyone. I'd like to echo Tom's comments. Thank you for joining us this morning, our second and hopefully last AGM via technology via Zoom. We hope for better things ahead, of course. We will likely continue, though, to record future public meetings and make them available on our website afterwards. We find that some members who would like to attend our meetings cannot at that particular time, and it's great to have them available afterwards. So we'll do that. However, next year, hopefully, again, we're going to see you in person. We're able to, well, maybe not shake hands yet, but at least bump elbows and chat in person. I invite you to, in the chat, to say hello by typing your name, introduce yourself, what lake you're on, which lake or cottagers or ratepayers association you're a member of. And you can do that throughout the meeting. And now to the business of the AGM. I call this meeting to order, and back to Tom to take us through the meeting.
Tom, could you unmute, please? Tom, unmute.
That's what I get for following my own orders about muting. Excuse me. Thank you. What you see in front of you is the agenda. The first item will be approving the minutes from last year's annual general meeting. Ed will then take us through the treasurer's report, just a short review of the treasurer's report. And then Mike Dolby will do some recognition of some members who have left the board this year and a new member who will be joining us. I will then take us through a brief snapshot of some of the wonderful activities that the volunteers have been involved in this year. We'll turn it over then to Ed to lead the section with regards to the election of the board for the coming year. There'll be an opportunity at that point for matters from the floor, and perhaps we can take the wild rice topic at that point, and any other matters, questions, or concerns that are raised by participants in this morning's meeting. Then we will turn over to Dr. Bob Bailey for the Dockside Chat. Now, not to put any pressure on Bob, but this is actually the world premiere of this Dockside Chat. No one on the board except for Bob has seen it, so we're all waiting with bated breath and are looking forward to a very entertaining and engaging segment. We'll then have another Q&A section, whether it be on stuff from the Dockside Chat or anything else that has occurred to anyone, and then we will wrap up the meeting at 11 o'clock. So that's what the agenda will be for this morning. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll begin with the matter of approving the minutes from the AGM a year ago. The link was included in the invitation that went out to everybody, so everyone will have had an opportunity to review the minutes from the 2020 AGM. I will take this opportunity then to move a motion that the minutes from last year's AGM be accepted. Is there a seconder?
Mike Dolby seconds the motion to approve the minutes of the 2020 AGM.
Hear you in the distance, Mike. I think you may be muted.
No, he wasn't muted. We could hear him.
Oh, okay. Then there's something wrong with my mic. I apologize. Okay, then I will turn it over to Ed to continue with the motion.
Thank you, Tom. So now that we have a motion that has been seconded, I'll open up for comments from anyone to be posted in the chat. Bob, if you see anything, I'll give a minute to have people type in anything that they have questions or concerns about the minutes.
Yeah, nothing here, Ed.
Okay. Hearing, seeing nothing being typed in the chat, I'll then call for the vote. And again, via chat, is there anyone opposed to this motion?
No opposition to the
Bob,
motion.
anyone?
No.
No one? Okay, then I will say motion carried, and thank you very much. I guess I'll keep going, Tom, for the treasurer's report.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I'd like to review our financials for our fiscal year ending December 30th, 2020. Yes, 2020. It's almost so long ago. This financials has been printed and published in our 2020 annual lake water quality report published last spring. And a link to the full financial statement contained in that report was sent out in our invitation emails and is here on the screen. Next slide, please. So I'll just take us through a few of the highlights on this thing, on the financials. This treasurer's report refers to the 2020 calendar year and the H&R Block statement of financial position summarizing revenue, expenditures, and assets for 2019 and 2020 fiscal years, as you see in front of you. Our thanks to Mr. Chad Irvin of H&R Block for preparing these financial statements. 2020 revenue of $19,221 increased by 53% over 2019 revenue. In this, the first year of pandemic lockdowns, donations actually decreased year over year. Businesses, individuals, associations, as you can see in rows 1 and rows 6 on your screen. The overall increase in revenue is attributed primarily to ad space sales in our annual lake water quality report, which you can see in row 3. We started that with our 2019 lake water quality report published in the May of 2020. And we are continuing to go forward with that, selling ad space in our publication on the back cover and the 2 inside pages. And that's what we're limiting it to. We don't want to make this too much of a commercial report. This is primarily about our lake water quality in the Kawarthas. Okay. We also received an increase in grant funding from municipalities from the year previous, as you can see in row 5. And we had 2 small grants from other sources for 2 specific projects, which you'd see in row 4. 2020 expenses of $14,040 increased by 17.5% over the previous year. By changing our liability insurer through the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Association, our insurance expense was reduced significantly by $651, as you can see in row 12. And our meeting costs were almost nil last year, due to no public meetings during the pandemic lockdowns. And you can see that in row 9. With the assistance of a small grant, increase in municipal grants, ad sales, and decrease in other expenses, we were able to purchase a dissolved oxygen meter, which accounts mainly for the increase this year on row 16. Some smaller differences in mailing and special projects expenses year over year, and the addition of an accounting cost, now in row 10, contributed to the overall increase in expenses. I now move that the Treasurer's report and the 2020 fiscal year financial statements be accepted. May I have a seconder?
Mike Dolby seconds the motion to approve the Treasurer's report as given.
Thank you, Mr. Dolby. I open now to in the chat for comments or questions, and I'll give us a minute. Bob, if you can let me know if anyone has any comments or questions.
Yes, Ed, we have a question from Janet Klein on the cost of the auditor.
Yes, thank you, Janet, for your question. In previous years, we had Grant Thornton doing our financial statements, and they were doing it as a pro bono, as a community service to our organization. The person in Grant Thornton has retired, and no one else in the organization was willing to take that on. So we approached Mr. Chad Irvin in H&R Block in Bob Cajun, who agreed to do that for a nominal sum of what you see, $300. Any other questions, Bob? Comments?
Janet suggests sending him a bottle of wine. I don't know if there's a motion necessary on that.
Thanks, Janet. I'll take this under consideration. It'll increase our expenses. Any further comments, questions?
And I wonder if I could just point out that Chad actually advertised in this year's report. So even though there were professional fees, he was kind enough to take an advertising spot. So he basically more or less broke even. So it's very generous that he has supported us in that fashion.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, exactly right.
No other questions, comments, or suggestions, Ed?
Thank you, Tom. I'll take the suggestions under consideration. Thanks, Bob. So I'll call for the vote. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? And in chat again, please. Bob, anyone?
No one opposed, Ed.
Thank you, Bob. Then I'll say that the motion is carried. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Mike Dolby, who is a director on the board of directors of KLSA for, geez, I don't even know how many years, a lot of years, and a long time community scientist to give some acknowledgement to some well-deserved acknowledgement to board directors who have left us and one who has joined us. Mike?
Well, good morning, everyone. During the past year, 3 members of the KLSA board resigned. And on behalf of the board, I would like to thank them for their service to KLSA. I also have the pleasure of introducing a new director who joined the board this year. Next slide, please. So Anna Courier joined the board in 2020 and assisted KLSA with community engagement. Anna had to resign from the board in July when she moved to Toronto to begin a new job, and we wish her well. Thank you, Anna, for your service on the KLSA board. Next slide. And Tracy Logan joined the board in 2014 and assisted KLSA in maintaining membership lists and community engagement. We thank you, Tracy, for your 5 years of service on the KLSA board. Next slide. And Bill Napier. Bill joined the KLSA board in 2015 and was KLSA's chair from 2015 till 2020. During his term, Bill carried out a study on the effects of climate change on the Kawartha Lakes region, and he was instrumental in instituting KLSA's climate change monitoring program involving the measurement of lake water temperature and dissolved oxygen. He also involved KLSA in the Natural Edge program that assists property owners to renaturalize their shoreline. Bill resigned this year to devote more time to his successful consulting business. Thank you, Bill, for your 6.5 years of leadership and service on the KLSA board. Next slide, please. Well, KLSA was very pleased to invite Kimberly Yong to join the board in March of 2021. Kim has a PhD in aquatic biology and toxicology, and she lives and works here in the Kawartha Lakes. Kim has been a member of the KLSA's editorial committee for the past 4 years, assisting Sheila with the production of our annual Lake Water Quality Report, and she shadowed the board in 2020. For the past year, Kim has been running KLSA's Natural Edge Shoreline Restoration Program. Please join me in welcoming Kimberly Yong. Next slide. So whilst they may not be able to hear us over muted microphones, I'd like you all to give a round of applause, clap your hands to our past and future board members. Thank you. And now back to Tom.
Thank you, Mike. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to very briefly, just for the next few slides, review some of the activities and programs that KLSA pursued in 2021. I'd like to, before we get underway here, just make an observation, which is that every single thing that the Kawartha Lake Stewards Association is done because of the support of volunteers. There's nothing that we do that isn't done by a volunteer. And so at the outset, I want to thank everybody who has made it possible. We simply wouldn't exist and wouldn't be able to do any of our programs without your support. Next slide, please. This is the slide you saw at the outset. It's our 20th anniversary report. It was a real pleasure to pull it together this year and to have the reminiscences of some of the former chairs. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Sheila Gordon-Delane and the rest of the editorial committee for their hard work. It's an ongoing process, and it takes a lot to make it happen. So thank you to Sheila and the team for putting together another great report. And as I mentioned a moment ago, our 20th anniversary edition. If you've not had a chance to read it already, I would encourage you to go online to review it. It's available now. Or if you would prefer a printed copy, feel free to reach out to us at klsa@klsa.info, and we'll be very happy to send you a hard copy. Next slide, please. E. coli sampling went smoothly in 2021. I want to thank everybody who helped to make that happen. We are very pleased to welcome back the Balsam Lake testers in the past year. In total, we tested 80 sites on 13 lakes. And of the almost 450 tests which were performed, only 8 of those exceeded the threshold of 50 CFUs per 100 milliliters of water, and only 1 exceeded 100. And so the results this year were very encouraging. As always, these results will be published in the coming year's annual water quality report. And the team that will be conducting or leading the effort in the coming year will be the same as it was in 2021. So it will be Mike Dolby and Cindy Lee. Cindy is the primary contact, and you'll be hearing further from her via email and at the spring 2022 meeting, as we said earlier, hopefully in person. Next slide, please. The phosphorus testing, the team leading that again was Mike and Cindy this year. The program sort of got back into its groove in 2021 after a rather abbreviated program last year because of the onset of the pandemic. We would welcome the engagement of additional testers in the Kawartha Lakes area. So anyone who would like to become a tester in the lake phosphorus program, please reach out to Cindy at the email that you see there, which is lee@klsa.info. Next slide, please. Starry Stonewort. There was some brief discussion about this just at the front end of the meeting, just as we were getting underway. KLSA collaborated with the Kawartha Conservation, Dr. Andrea Kirkwood and Dr. Harold Lyle from Ontario Tech, and as well as the Starry Stonewort Collaborative and the Ontario Invading Species Awareness Program. Our purpose in this program is to get a better understanding of the distribution and abundance of Starry Stonewort in our region. Approximately 70 volunteers performed nearly 200 rake tosses and analyzed the results. And these were entered into the early detection distribution mapping system and verified by Ontario Tech. So once again, this is something that was made possible by all of our dedicated volunteers. So thank you again for your assistance. Next slide, please. Water temperature and dissolved oxygen monitoring. Many of you will know that we did a pilot program on that in 2020 and rolled that out this year. It's part of a 3-year program. This year, we affixed 10 temperature logging devices near shore on docks and so forth. And also, we're fortunate enough to gain approval from the Trans-Severn Waterways to attach 5 loggers in mid-leg buoys in 2022. So that'll give us some additional information. I was going to say depth, but I wouldn't want to be accused of using a pun. We will also be continuing to sample the deep basins in 10 lakes in order to probe for water temperature and dissolved oxygen. And as many people listening this morning know, that is absolutely, those are both essential to the ecology of our lake system. So we look forward to getting additional information in the coming years to better understand sort of where we are and where we might be going. Next slide, please. And finally, Watersheds Canada, the Natural Edge program. There are actually some volunteers who are out today doing some planting. We've had sort of a round of planting in early summer this year. We did 5 sites in May and June, and we're doing 6 sites that are underway right now. As I say, there's plantings going on today, tomorrow, and next weekend, and already have 4 sites lined up for early summer of 2022. This has been made possible by the support of the Environment Council, funding from the Royal Bank of Canada's Tech for Nature Fund and Stony Lake Heritage Foundation. And we're all working in concert with Watersheds Canada. So once again, thank you to all of the volunteers and to the property owners who participated in this year's and are already signed up for next year's program. Next slide, please. I'm now going to turn over to Ed, and he will handle the election of the 21-22 Board of Directors. Ed, over to you.
Yes, unmuting. I'm following Tom's direction. Thank you, Tom. So you can see that we've been and continue to be very busy with a few projects beyond our foundational program of E. coli testing. As Tom mentioned, if you have any interest in volunteering or finding out more about any of these programs, please send us an email. And now I'd like to call for the election of the KLSA Board of Directors for 2021 and 2022. In our invitation emails, we asked anyone interested in volunteering on the KLSA board to please send us an email. Our constitution calls for a board of up to 12 directors. At this time, I am pleased to present the roster of names in front of you of people now on your screen who are standing for election or re-election to the board for 2021 and 2022. Since there are fewer than 12, I am pleased to acclaim these people as making up the board of directors for 2021 to 2022, and I move that this acclamation be accepted. May I have a seconder?
Mike Dolby will second the motion to acclaim the slate on the screen.
Thank you, Mike. And now, as before, if there are any questions or comments from anyone, please post them on the chat and we'll give that a minute.
Not seeing anything, Ed.
Thank you, Bob. Just wait 2 more nanoseconds, just in case anybody has slow fingers. No? Okay. Thank you, Bob. Then I will call for the vote. Is there anyone opposed to this acclamation of this board?
No opposition noted.
Thank you, Bob. Then I will say this motion is carried. Thank you. Congratulations and thank you to our 2021 to 2022 board for volunteering. And again, to everyone here attending the AGM, if anyone is interested in serving on the KLSA board, please email us and one of our directors will contact you. Thank you very much. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks, Ed. Next slide, please, Bob. Okay, so we're going to open it up here to matters from the floor. Perhaps we could start with the first one from Mayor Clarkson. You had asked a little bit about the wild rice question. So perhaps you'd care to unmute yourself and raise that now that we've got the meeting underway.
Yes, I'm concerned that the wild rice situation is not getting more attention. And I started out in the chat just to say how hard I know it is to keep an association this vibrant for 20 years and to congratulate you. But as time has gone on, you have moved from issue to issue, and the Starry Stonewort right now is getting quite a bit of attention. And it's an invasive species, but it's also a natural type of thing. The situation that we're getting into the wild rice is probably every bit as destructive, and it's not natural. It is slowing down water flow. It's preventing people from enjoying their water. It's causing a rise in temperature of water, because as you slow water down, water gets warmer. So I think it's something that this association could be looking at in the near future. My concern going forward is is twofold. One of the areas that is a very good supporter of finance for municipalities is lakeshore properties. And if we don't take some sort of action sooner or later, there's going to be a class action suit by the people on the lakeshore who are saying we're not lakeshore anymore because we can't get near the lake for the wild rice. So those are my concerns about it. I know you're saying it's political and maybe the solution is going to be, but politics is moved by individual groups of people who recognize something. Politicians don't normally do that by themselves. So I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, for those comments. And I would invite anyone else who wants to discuss this with further comments. Please, I'm going to say, Tom, what do you think? Open up your mic and one at a time have a discussion, or back in the chat.
We can do it either way, Ed. If people wish to weigh in on this in terms of the issue or what KLSA's role should be in this type of an issue, please, if you just either put your comments into chat or unmute yourself and share your thoughts.
This is Mike Dolby. Well, one of my thoughts on this is that one of our key scientific advisors, Dr. Eric Seeger, who's an expert in macrophytes, has always told us that it is native. It was probably a lot more widespread in the past before water levels have changed, and that to some extent what's happening, although it is being seeded, the fact that it is thriving is because the conditions in those parts of the lake are very suitable for it. So while I appreciate Mayor Clarkson's concerns, we are being told by our scientific advisors that this really is not something that it's easy to do something about. With respect to the fact that it may be changing water conditions, I think we have to be moved primarily by scientific evidence, and the fact that we are doing now a study on lake water temperatures and such things, I think may help to provide us with some information on that. But as Ed has said, being a volunteer nonprofit organization, we want to be careful to be seen to be making our arguments on scientific basis without being swayed too much by politics. I recognize is a difficult balance there. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Mike. Is there anyone else with any thoughts or observations they'd like to share with the group today?
Could you please identify if the information you've got regarding the planting of rice is anecdotal, or has it been proven to be planted?
I don't think that there's any question but that active planting is going on. There are videos of that. In fact, there's something, I think it was a special that was done by CBC of called Cottagers and Indians. And in that, it shows some interviews with some of the people who are involved with the issue on both sides of the discussion. So there's no question but that that some of the ice, or I'm sorry, the rice is being actively planted, and then some is probably naturally propagating.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions on that topic or any other topic? Oh, there's a hand up. Mayor Clarkson, please speak up.
Okay, I would suggest that you put one of your temperature thermometers in Pigeon Creek and in Kawartha Hideaway. So put them where the rice is really thick to actually see what that temperature is doing. So add to the science by being what you're good at.
Brett, you're kind of the point person, and Mike on the temperature and dissolved oxygen initiative. Your thoughts on that?
Hi, thanks. This is Brett here. Thanks, Janet. Absolutely, we'd be more than happy to if there were volunteers in those vicinities, Kawartha Hideaway or in Southern Pigeon Lake. We've been more than happy to help them deploy a little water temperature logger for the summer and monitor temperature and produce it in our annual report. That would be fantastic.
I will do that.
Good stuff. I'm going to suggest, if I may, that we sort of move on from that particular topic, very important topic, but wondering if there are any other topics or questions, concerns that anyone else would like to raise this morning.
Tom said,
yes.
I'll just say again that at the next KLSA board meeting, Mayor Clarkson, we will have this topic on the agenda for discussion and further action based on the comments here today.
Not seeing anything else in the chat room, Tom.
Okay, well, perfect. Well, then with that in mind, next slide, please. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Bob Bailey for the world premiere of the second Dockside Chat. Over to you.
Thank you for the lack of pressure that you're putting on me there, Tom. Thanks everyone for joining us in this world premiere. I just wanted to say a couple things about it. In addition to, I thank the guest of this Dockside Chat, Mike Dolby, within the video. But thanks again to Mike. We had a great time at my place having a talk about the building of his interest in water and in particular what he's done in terms of as a community scientist in the Kawartha Lakes over the last many years. The other thing I wanted to say on a technical note, so I'm going to show the movie, but this is not like watching Netflix. Those of you who've experienced too much Zoom over the last year and a half know this well. The sound will be okay. The picture will be not as good quality as the original movie and somewhat a little bit out of sync with the sound. So I'm going to ask our web and Facebook master, Jeff Chalmers, after this premiere he will have a link available on our Facebook site and our website, so that you'll be able to watch more like watching Netflix. What you're about to experience is more like if you found an old Super 8 movie in the basement and brought it up and put it on the projector. So with that caveat, I will move over to the video. So just give me 1 sec here. And Tom, I'll ask for a thumbs up from you that the volume is okay once I start the video, please. Well, for this edition of the KLSA Dockside Chats, I had a chance to sit down with Mike Dolby, a fellow member of the Kawartha Lake Stewards Association Board and a longtime citizen scientist. After checking out a couple of oxygen meters on my dock, Mike and I sat down for a chat. Welcome, Mike. Great to have you here.
Wonderful to be here, Bob.
The first thing I wanted to ask, I said longtime citizen scientist, how did you get into looking at lakes and rivers and such?
Well, I guess I've always been interested in the water. I was raised next to Lake St. Louis, or very close to it, in
really?
Montreal. In those days, you could swim in it, and as a kid, my pals and I would be down in the lake most of the summer, learning to swim, fish, boat, and that kind of thing. So I had an early introduction. There was quite a hiatus for a while. After university, I took up scuba diving
Oh, really?
in the 70s
Okay.
for a brief period.
In freshwater or mainly marine?
Out in Great Lakes.
Okay.
We were in Toronto by then, and I learned to dive in a swimming pool in Toronto, but then did open water in Lake Huron and places like that.
Oh, cool.
But before very long, 2 children came along, and in 1980, my wife and I bought our cottage on Lake Catchawanoka, the lowest of our Kawartha lakes. So from then on, my tank is still in the back of the garage, but I don't think it would be certified anymore. I haven't.
Well, you
used it for
never
many
used.
years.
I think I still have a paddy card somewhere, but
Yeah.
it's been a few years for me
And
too.
I've had my beard for so long that my mask probably wouldn't seal unless I shaved. So
Okay, but
then
at some point you started measuring
I did.
various things in
Well, we
Catchawanoka, among other places, I guess.
Well, in 1980 we arrived. I was still working, so it was mainly weekends and summer holidays. But of course, we were right on the lake, and we were watching changes, through the 80s and 90s as
Wow.
zebra buckfuls came in, and certainly the rise of milfoil and such changes. I retired in 2000, and then we also got very interested in gardening during that period. We found that even though we had not wanted any gardens at the cottage that we bought, there were remnants, and so we, even though the place is not well winterized, we started coming up from April till November.
Okay.
So we were there and able to observe the lake through a good deal of summer periods. And really, it was in about 2005 that I went to a Lakeland conference. And there I met Mike Stedman, who was manning KLSA information booth. And I picked up some of the annual reports, and Mike was a very good salesman, and certainly portrayed KLSA well. So I went to their meetings, picked up further reports, and was kind of hooked, I guess. I started did phosphorus measurements and E. coli starting the next year. And also, which in 2006, I decided, well, I wonder what's going on. I was reading the annual reports at that time, and I must say, over the years, I've been back and read them many times. In fact, just in the last few months, I've been rereading some of the old reports, and there are some terrific articles. Some really of the articles written by Kevin Walters and Kathleen McKenzie about the Kawartha Lakes in general, phosphorus in particular. They are really terrific. But at that time, and I think still today, there are some mysteries that haven't yet been, they haven't been explained to my satisfaction yet. It's particularly to do with phosphorus. Its rise and fall, what causes it to vary from year to year. So after reading those early reports, I decided, well, maybe I should be doing some measurements too, just to sort of see how things change during the year. And so I set myself up a spreadsheet and would go out every couple of days about 4 o'clock and measure water temperature.
4 in the afternoon, I hope.
About 4 in the afternoon, yes indeed. Well, usually after I've been gardening or doing other activities all day, by about 4 it was nice to go down to the lake in my bathing suit, have a swim, go and check the rain gauge and the temperature. I had a min-max thermometer, one of these U-shaped devices where it leaves a little pin at the minimum.
The old style.
The old style, not electronic. And I'm using it today.
And very reliable.
Very reliable. It's a mercury thermometer.
Yep.
And
when did that record keeping start?
In 2006 was my first year, and I started in early April, and I recorded through to the end of October, and I've been doing that every year since then. Once you get into the habit, it's just sort of every day about 4 or every 2 or 3 days. This year, I should say, I've been doing it virtually every day if I can. And that's because I've become very interested in flow and current. So we can talk about that either later or another time.
No, I think it's definitely an interesting aspect of the Kawartha Lakes and the Trent Severn system in general is that you've got these beads on a string, and everything that's happening in the beads has a lot to do with what's happening in that string, right?
Absolutely, and Kawartha is the lowest point on the string, so everything in the watershed goes down through Kawartha.
All roads go to Rome.
All roads go to Rome. Everything that comes down from Halliburton, in from Scugog, down from the upper end of Stony Lake, it all eventually comes down through Kawartha, which is quite a narrow lake. In fact, originally it was a string of 3 small lakes with rapids between, and it was in the 1840s when they built not the first, but the first successful dam in Lakefield, the one that lasted. They raised the water level by 43 inches.
Wow.
And that flooded the rapids and in fact flooded all the way right up to the top end of Kawartha where I am. And the reason I know that is because we own an island which is part of our deed, but the reason is that it was part of the mainland when deeded in 1830. And the shallow land behind it was flooded when the dam was built. So the island, being part of the mainland originally, is part of our deed, as opposed to being Indian land or something else.
You know, that's a story everywhere. This little back bay here is part of our deed because this whole bay was a bunch of stumps and so on, you know, post the establishment of the lock and dam system.
When I canoe around behind my island, I have to be careful because there's still enormous pine stumps They're 150 years old, but they've been under the water, and they're quite deteriorated, but they are still basically there.
So you've watched things day to day, year to year, and I mean, it's funny. I just finished teaching an environmental science course. When I was talking about climate change, I felt almost like a living museum because I'm talking to them about changes I've seen over my career since the 80s. Are you seeing stuff when you look at your spreadsheets, when you look at the lake? Are you seeing things that to you are really evidence of climate change over that 30-year
Well, I must say
or
that,
so period? I mean, I guess you're 15, 20 years is your data collection.
Well, it's interesting because, every year, one of the things it's shown me is that every year is different.
Agreed.
A little different one way or the other. You particularly notice this when you look at spring floods. But in other ways too, the maximum temperatures that the water in the air gets and the time and so on, they vary. Rainfall is one of those things too that varies considerably from year to year. I have a number of charts. I'll just show you a few things here. This is my clipboard, which my current readings scribbled in. I just record them here, and then I take them in when I feel like it or I'm interested in, and shove the numbers into my spreadsheet. And I keep a spreadsheet for each year, but then I also have what I call an epitome file, or it would be a database where I bring all the data for each year into one great big file. There are different sheets within the spreadsheet, but then that allows me then to look at things that are happening from year to year. And one of the things particularly, it came up when KLSA started talking about doing long range, looking at water temperature over the long term. So I did look at my data, and this is for example water temperatures, all the different curves over the years. I can pick out data and do things with that data if I want to.
So you're sure you don't want to do another grad project?
Well, I'm going to be 80 next month. I'm hoping to be able to collect data for many more years, and so far I'm healthy and hardy. But
one thing that
I do have my hands full right now.
One thing that might be interesting, I don't know, we can talk about it, is I have a few senior undergrads who are going to work on a thesis this year, and we're going to meet in a couple of weeks to figure out a project, but maybe one of them could have a look with you at the data, because I'm sure there's fodder in there for some interesting research.
I'm more than willing. Whoops, a little. Yeah, I'm more. I'm willing to share the data. There's no point in collecting it if nobody looks at it. So, by all means, if you think there's interest in it, then sure.
Okay, and I think Oscar's telling us that we're out of time.
I think so. And thank you for your interest in my measurement projects. Like I say, I'm hoping to continue for many more years.
I hope you do, and I'll help you whatever way I can, Mike.
Well, thanks.
Thanks for chatting with us.
Great.
Thanks, folks, and back to you, Tom.
No, I just had it.
Thank you very much, Bob. That was wonderful. Thank you. I really
Great.
appreciated that. Mike, thank you for your time. That was very interesting. Great that Oscar was keeping the clock on that and brought it to a successful conclusion. But very interesting, Mike, what you've been able to capture in terms of long-term trends over the last 15 years. What I'd like to do now is open it up a little bit. Yes.
Excuse me, Tom. Could everybody except Tom mute themselves, please? We're getting something from Greg F. There we go.
There we go. Thank you.
I have the power of mute.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bob. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to open it up. If there are any more questions that come up as a result of the dockside chat, or if there are any other questions that anyone would like to ask, now would be a good time to either put them in through chat or to unmute yourself and to speak up.
So Janet Klein, I think she's the one who suggested the bottle of wine, but anyway, she's wondering, and maybe Mike can answer this. Can you tell me where this lake is? I can't find it. Maybe I am spelling it wrong. And I assume that's about Kawartha, which it took me hours to just pronounce it properly. So go ahead, Mike.
Hi, Janet. Lake Kawartha is the lowest lake in the Kawartha chain. Young's Point on Highway 28 is at the top of the lake, and Lakefield is at the bottom of the lake. So it's just below Clear and Stony.
Bob, you've got a map in your background. Maybe it's on there?
Yeah, that's a bit much for me to negotiate that right now, Ed. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough. It's also depicted, I believe, in the map of our Kawartha Lakes area in our water quality report. If I'm not mistaken, I have to dig one up, but I'm sure it's on there. Anyways, look north of Lakefield.
Okay, I think I saw Mayor Clarkson had her hand up there at one point. So there might have been something else that she wanted to raise.
Go ahead. If you're speaking, Mayor Clarkson, we're not hearing you right now.
Okay, I'm trying. I've got a lot of phones going at me here. I just wanted to make a comment before I have to leave. The water levels right now are higher than we've seen even in spring times in a long time. So if you have access to your overall membership and they're anywhere on the water, it's a good idea to take a peek if they've left boats in or whatever, because the water is extremely high, as are the currents.
Good advice.
Hi. Yes, and this is Ed. I've become aware that actually the locks from, I think it's lock 1 to, I'm not sure, is it 23, is currently closed, and it's being managed by the TSW organization because of these dangerous high water levels. So that's good advice, and we'll make sure that we get something out to our membership. Thank you.
I was speaking to a lockmaster a couple of days ago, and she mentioned that they were actually going to be closing the system for 3 days in order to move a bunch of water. So this is kind of like a controlled burn, but this is a controlled release because of the buildup. So they'll be reopening the system and slowing down the water flow. So what we're probably seeing, back to the sort of the beads on a string metaphor that Bob had used earlier, we're seeing the beads, the water moving from one bead to the next. And so it's actually fairly low below Lakefield right now, but it's very high on Lower Buckhorn. I was up there yesterday. So I think what we're seeing is a lot of water moving through the lakes in a fairly short period of time. I was amazed, I'm sorry, this is just a piece of trivia. When I was speaking with the lockmaster, she was saying that when they open the dam in Lakefield, they can feel it, that's lock 26. They can feel it actually at lock 25, 10 minutes later. That's how short a period of time it takes for the water flow to move from one lock to another. That would probably be you know, a couple or 3 kilometers down the lake. So it's a very dynamic system. Okay, are there any other questions, or is there anything else that anyone would like to raise just before we wrap here this morning?
Mike Dolby, I'd just like to make a comment about the water. Yeah, this is because I've been monitoring these things very carefully with interest in flow this year. Yeah, the water level, or the dam opening and the amount of flow is higher now than it was in the spring. But of course, we had a very small spring flood. But of course, it's all due to that very extensive rains that we had about a week and a half ago. Here at my place, we had 56 millimeters, which is over 2 inches of rain over about a 24-hour period, which is really exceptional. When you think of that over the whole watershed, which for Katchawanooka is over 4,000 square kilometers, that's a lot of water. And yes, they're having to just pour it out of the system, and they just can't maintain the navigation on the river with that kind of flow, so they've had to close it down. Thank you.
If I may suggest at this point, I want to be mindful of the clock. If we could, what we're going to do now is that we're actually going to wrap it up, but we're going to leave the Zoom link open for the next half hour in case anyone would like to have a conversation. A lot of the folks on the line here this morning have been working with each other directly or indirectly for quite a number of years. And so without any further ado, I just want to make one final observation. As I said earlier, that everything rather that we do is done by volunteers, and we want to take this opportunity to thank them once again. We're always on the lookout for more volunteers. If they're going to do testing or if they would like to join the board, please just email us. So without any further ado, I think why don't we have a bit of an experiment here? Why doesn't everybody turn their video on? Let's just get a bank of people with their video on. Let's see if how many people we can get to come on stream here right now. All the shy people. Actually, they're not very shy at all. Well, listen, let's take this opportunity to just wave goodbye to everybody. I wish everybody a great winter season, and we'll very much look forward to seeing you in 2022, hopefully in the flesh. So listen, stay safe, everybody, and we'll look forward to working with you again in the coming year. And without any further ado, that's the end of the formal meeting. But if anyone would like to stay on Zoom and have a conversation, you can see some of the folks that are there. And as I say, I know you've known each other for many years, and maybe you haven't spoken for a while. So please take advantage of this opportunity, and we'll talk to you in 2022. You take care. Bye-bye.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Nice to see you all, sort of see you. Who's got anything to say? Oh, there's one of my dogs. Thank you, Emma. Let's open this up.
Hi, I'd just like to say hello to many old friends that I see here. Anne Ambler, I haven't spoken to for a few years, and Dave Young over on Sturgeon Lake, and so many others. It's great to see you. You know, we were talking about flow and how important that is and how much there's going on right now. This really piqued my interest last year when we were Brett Trudrino had organized the dry run, shall we say, of our temperature and dissolved oxygen measuring process, and we did a number of measurements in a number of lakes. I think Diane Trousey, who's on, did them up in Big Cedar, Brett in Buckhorn, and I did them in Kawartha. And we did these measurements a number of times during the summer, and the last one being near the end of September. And whilst we got the normal thermocline type of response in during the early part of the year, when it came to the end of September, all of a sudden we got total mixing in Kawartha, also in Lovesick and Buckhorn, but not up in Big Cedar. And I speculated that that was because they'd increased the flow, because come the end of September, if it's been if they don't anticipate needing more water, they start draining down the feeder lakes and the flow tends to increase a bit. So with that, but not everyone agreed with that, and that may be true. But this year, I decided to do my own little project where I, because the dissolved oxygen meter isn't used that much during the early part of the year, I had use of it, and I've been doing measurements every week. And this has been an interesting year because it's been so dry for long periods, and then we have a patch of rain, and then it gets very dry again. Anyway, I've been monitoring every week, and what I find is when it's dry and the flow is shut right down, and I'm measuring flow in a couple of ways, I find that you get thermocline building up, and as soon as we get a ton of rain and flow increases, total mixing to the bottom. And we've been going through that cycle through the summer, but as of that last set of rain, it's just been total mixing, and I anticipate will be now to the end of the year, because not only are they getting rid of that rain, but they're also beginning to drain down the feeder lakes before they before freeze up. They have to have them empty so that they can absorb all the spring flood in the spring. Anyway, just a few comments. I better shut up in case anybody else wants to say something.
Diane wanted to speak.
Diane. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Mike. I think that, I don't know if it was yourself or Brett that I was talking to earlier in the year. We've actually had Paul Frost come onto our lake every 4 days, right from the day the ice was off until he's still doing it now. And he is doing dissolved oxygen and other parameters. He is perfectly willing to share his data with your climate change project. So just let me know what range of data or what data you want, and I'll ask him to send it to me so I can share it with you.
Well, thanks, Diane. And yes, I've been in touch with Paul. We did share a bit of data early in the season, and as we get towards the end of it, we will. And it's interesting, I did mention that yesterday, rather last year, you were doing some measurements. And so I looked at one of the interesting things is, of course, that Big Cedar is not on the flow path of the Trent Severn. And also it's got relatively small watershed, 200 or 300 square kilometers, which is quite small. Whereas Kawartha, when you go to the province of Ontario's mapping tool and whatnot, you can actually map out watersheds. Our watershed is something like 46,000 square kilometers because it takes in everything all the way up to Halliburton, all the drainage that goes down through the Trent. So I pointed out to Paul in the spring that it'd be a really interesting comparison study of, because I anticipate that you will have a thermocline well into the fall. It will start cooling down, but whereas ours is gone usually by the end, mid to end of September, because the Trent need to get rid of that water in starting, whether or not. in the early in order to maintain, to be sure they have water to operate the canal. They need that flow. They need enough that they can provide lockage and maintain water levels. And since their crystal ball isn't perfect, they retain as much as they can in the early part of the summer, but they know fall rains will come, and when they get towards the end of September, they start getting rid of any extra water up there. So it's a really interesting case study, and I'm looking forward to collaborating with Paul on that.
Yeah, so you are getting the data straight from Paul then? I don't need to get in the middle of that?
I did in early spring communicate with him, and he was certainly willing to do that. We haven't swapped data since, but I certainly intend to do that.
He actually had one of his grad students on our lake in the winter, and he got a winter profile as well.
Yes, he shared that with us. I think Bob and I were chatting with him earlier.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's interesting how he sends a grad student out on the ice.
Oh, that was her own project, so I guess that's why.
With safety precautions, I'm sure.
The other thing that I have to apologize for, my husband overestimated the length of the battery that we put in on our data logger for our water temperature. And so a period of time in the summer we do not have data for because the battery went dead. So going forward, we will replace it every spring, but he's like, oh no, it's gonna last.
I have to do mine, but I'm planning to, I have one logger that I leave in all year. And I also have an air temperature one, which I have all year. So I'm planning to replace my battery every 6 months, whether it needs it or not. It just seems to be the safer thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Are you interested in our air temperature logger as well as our water temperature logger? You're muted.
Sorry, I think Brett can speak to that, but yes, I certainly would provide. I'm planning to provide my air temperature data to Brett, whether or not he wants or will use it. What do you think, Brett? More the merrier?
Yeah, hi Dan, good to see you again.
Hey Brett.
Yeah, and thanks for everything. By all means, yeah, send it over. It's a lot of data, right? Every hour, all day long, all year, adds up in a hurry times how many different sites. But it does help, tell the story. Now, when we're looking at kind of reporting this data for our annual water quality report, my preference is to kind of use a more, standardized or reliable source. Say, for example, from the Peterborough Airport, they're quality controlled. And what I've noticed when I've tried to put up my logger, basically tacked to a tree, is some wonky data. And I don't know if that's from a sunlight, like a radiation, like a sunlight radiating a certain way, or I've heard that sometimes you need like a solar shield for these things to kind of buffer, the impact of direct sun. So I guess a couple lessons learned there for me is one, have a critical look at that information, and maybe it's worth comparing that against a more reliable source like Trent University or the Peterborough Airport, or there's others around that are operated by Environment Canada. But certainly it's useful data. And our priority is definitely water temperature, but if you've got air temperature, that's great. Yeah, flip it along and everything helps. So thank you for that.
Yeah, on the air temperature, I installed a a weather station on my roof this year. And I also have the data logger, my air temperature data logger, which is in a shady location on the side of my boathouse. So it can be interesting to compare the two. They're only about couple of 100 feet apart, but and one's down near the ground, one's up in the air. It'll be very interesting to see how much, if any, variation there is. Like you say, if you get a spike of sunlight or some reflection on the logger, it might give you some odd spikes. So be interesting to do that comparison.
I bought a weather station for my husband, and I'm hoping that we're going to bring the TV antenna up because it measures wind, and so we need to get it up above the tree canopy. So we have a TV antenna at home, and so I'm thinking two reasons: get better reception. We only get one station right now, which is global. And probably that's all we'll get, but it'll at least improve it so that we don't lose it. But also to get this weather station up with the wind and everything on it. So that'll be interesting.
What do you think, folks? Bob, Ed, shall we call it a day?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's no other chatting going on, then sure, we can wrap this up.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Talk to you
Great.
soon.
And thank you, Bob, for
Thank
a great
Thank
stick
you.
handling of the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Bye.